Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harbedian.
Here.
Councilmember Arizmendi.
Present.
Councilmember Kaposha.
Here.
And Councilmember Gosh.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum. May conduct city business.
Thank you. And we will turn this over to Councilmember Rochelle Arizmendi.
So if we can please stand and put your right hand over your heart, and let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Given that today is our Aloha Shirt Day, not the Hawaiian Shirt Day, but Aloha Shirt Day, and also that I have a lot of family from Hawaii, and this is a lot of our culture, and when I interact with them, I just wanted to share something that I read today about the word mahalo and the sacred Hawaiian word of thanks and gratitude. Mahalo is a word that is used to express thanks and gratitude, and is much more than just a polite gesture of thankfulness. It conveys a powerful spiritual understanding that reinforces an ancient Hawaiian understanding, and the spiritual understanding is hidden in the roots of the word. Kauna is a Hawaiian word that means hidden meaning and is often realized as a double entendre, often employing the kauna in words to delight or provoke the listener with subtle innuendo and a pointed irony. In native Hawaiian culture, words are considered to be embedded with sacred energy or mana and are possessive of great power to do both good and harm. It is why choosing the right words and understanding the kauna hidden meaning was and still is very important today. So the kauna of mahalo is in three parts. Ma, which it means within. Ha means breath of life or divine breath of life. And alo means in the presence of. So the complete translation, including the hidden meaning, reads, thankful to be in the presence of the divine breath of life. It both recognizes the divine breath in oneself and the individual one is thankful for. So I just wanted to give my mahalo to our city council and all the work we've done over the years, or years actually now, it's plural. Mahalo to our staff that continue to be committed to the work that we do as a council and really what the residents are looking for. And a mahalo to our residents for advocating, for making sure that they're expressing what their desires, concerns, and priorities are. And we look forward to a month of dark August, and a mahalo for our upcoming year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we need approval of the agenda. I would like to note that we did not have a closed session tonight, so we will not have a report out from that. And is there any other items that we need to change, City Manager?
Yes, Mayor. Staff would like to continue item number 3 under discussion regarding Title 17 recordation requirement for second unit permit.
Okay. Are there any other changes? So with those two changes, can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the changes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. We can get on with our business. As mentioned, we did not have a closed session this evening. And now it's time for mayor and city council reports. Who would like to go first?
I'll report
Sorry.
first.
Go ahead.
Just one item is I attended Community Services Commission last week, and I know there's been a lot of anxiousness behind the Kensington, or not Kensington, I apologize, for Kirsten Court and the work that we're going to do there. So they've been reviewing that, and we hope to bring something to, they hope to bring something to council soon.
I'll go. Last night I attended the Chamber of Commerce Town Hall here in Council Chambers. My colleague here, Councilmember Capochi, and his wife were here as well, and it was really well attended. Our business community really turned out. City Manager England was here with a complement of staff, and they took a variety of questions in several different areas, particularly water infrastructure and public safety. It was a good discussion, and I thought the Chamber Board did a really nice job of pulling the whole event off. Steve Skirba, Carol Canterbury, and Susan Henderson. So it was, I thought a great event. I think they're going to do the same thing next year. Last Wednesday, I also attended the Joint Powers Insurance Authority Annual Board of Directors meeting in La Palma. JPIA is one of the Joint Powers Organization we're members of as an agency. They have determined that their members need more training in terms of risk management. So the big news this year is they're spending over $1 million that wasn't in the budget last year on risk management training for member agencies. And in keeping in that vein, this September 19th through 21st, they are holding a risk management education forum in Carlsbad, and they will underwrite the costs for attendance for our employees, managers, employees, and city councils especially invited. So I thought that might be worthy of our consideration. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, got a couple things real quick. As I sent an email, I attended the LA County Board of Supervisors meeting last week.
Can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I attended the County Board of Supervisors meeting last week, and the big thing on the agenda was the stormwater tax that they voted to put on the agenda in November. It passed by a 4-to-1 vote, and our supervisor, Catherine Barger, was the lone vote against it, and she was very consistent in her understanding of the things I spoke about of why this is a bad idea. So I did speak and spoke of our Sierra Madre's opposition to it, and I'll just have to say that most of the speakers were in favor of it. It appeared to be just a big love fest of people gathered to support the stormwater tax. So anyway, that was done. I think it's going to come up with the San Gabriel COG, Council of Governments, who represents San Gabriel Valley, and I'm going to try to convince them not to support this. At the last COG meeting, there are two items I'd like to mention. A woman named Anna Estevez spoke. She is the mother of Piki Andresian, who was murdered brutally. And you've probably all heard about it because the murderer, her ex-husband, was found unconscious at one of the parks in South Pasadena. And it took about 2 months to find the body of the child. And so what she has done is she's worked with Assemblymember Rubio on H.R. 113, which is the bill is to impose trauma-informed training to train and for anybody who's in the business of handling children with the county and Health and Human Services, to train them in recognizing evidence of domestic violence and child abuse. And her story, I'm telling you, it was really, really heartbreaking. I mean, everybody was crying at the darn COG meeting, but it's just horrible of her fights to protect her child. And in spite of all the evidence that there was abuse and manipulation going on here, she could not get the courts or anybody to revoke the 50% joint custody of the child, and he winds up murdering the child. Turns out that this happens quite often, that children are murdered by a parent throughout the United States. So anyway, long story short, she's asking, and the council overwhelmingly supported, that we ask each of our cities to take, to address it and create a measure, or not a measure, but a resolution in support of H.R. 113. So I'm going to ask that that be agendized here. Like I say, just really a touching and horrible story. Also, there was a vote on Proposition 6, and the COG's position asking that we oppose Proposition 6, which is to repeal SB 1, which is the gas tax. So I couldn't vote on that. I had to abstain because it was nothing that came before the council, and I really don't know how you feel about it. I hope that you're against Proposition 6, but I don't know that you are. But that would reverse the gas tax, and you've seen our streets getting paved here in Sierra Madre. Our city manager and staff has done a good job in going after those SB 1 funds and using that to fix up our streets. So we benefit greatly from it. I think it's something that we really need, but the resolution did pass 10-3 with 7 abstentions, so it did pass. So the council's position is to oppose Proposition 6. Thank you.
Thank you. And you did note about putting resolution HR 113 on the agenda.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. I don't have anything but to say congratulations to Mayor Pro Tem. He has a new addition to his family between the time we last. He's looking good.
Hey.
Our son Joshua was born on July 11th at about 5 p.m. and he was healthy baby, 8 pounds, 12 ounces, 21 inches. Mom's doing well, and he's doing well. So it's been an eventful couple weeks. So thank you.
Well,
Appreciate it.
congratulations.
Thanks.
Okay, on to, public comment. Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to comment on any item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one running to the podium to speak, we'll go on to our consent item. And before we do this, I would like to ask the city attorney, do I need to recuse myself from the water improvements, since I do live on one of those streets in question?
You, if, as long as it's a street, can you hear? I can't tell. Okay, as long as it's a street among many streets and at least 10% of the property owners would be similarly impacted, by the improvement, then you do not.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can choose to recuse yourself, and if it's on consent, you don't have to leave the dais.
And 100% of the residents would benefit from this. 100%.
Absolutely. Then no business could be done in the city.
That street is horrible.
All righty. City manager, did you want me to bring
Just
this up?
pass it
Oh,
down.
pass it down. The consent agenda, please.
Thanks, Mayor. We have 5 items on consent tonight. Item A, notice of completion, fiscal year 2017-2018 street improvement project, fiscal year 2018-19 blanket purchase orders for vendors in excess of $45,000. C, granular activated carbon replacement. D, recommendation to approve plans and specifications for water main replacements at various city locations and direct city staff to seek construction bids. And E, adoption of resolution 18-39 of the City Council of the City of Sierra Madre approving certain demands.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for any of these items from the council? We'll bring it to public comment. Does anybody wish to comment on any of these items, A through E?
I would just like to comment and thank staff for the street improvement project that came in at $46,000 less than what was awarded.
Yes.
It's always a
Hear, hear.
good thing. And just really looking forward to the water main replacement, and I do like the way you set it up to where you can squeeze extra things in if you have the money. I do have a question I forgot to ask though. PVC pipes, why would we not do something that is so much cheaper that has a 100-year lifespan like the ductile iron?
The ductile iron, the way it's produced, comes out in a spiral. So if it cracks or gets a pinhole, often it's able to be clamped and replaced. The PVC in early construction comes out more linear, so a crack can spread sideways, which is harder to clamp. But now the way it's being produced, that's less of an issue. So we're confident in the lifespan and application, but we just want to make sure that it works here before we kind of go full bore and replace everything with it. It is cheaper with a longer lifespan and is more durable and less susceptible to rust and the other items that make the pipes break down with the water here.
I would just, because it's so much cheaper, it just seems to me that even if you did get cracks and it cost you more 50 years down the road, the net present value of that savings is tremendous. And
It's true, and we get savings on both ends as
Yeah.
well. So I think we are going to put a pretty good application of it out with this bid because we do think the savings, just for the public, we anticipate being about $300,000, which equates to 3 more blocks in Maine. But we just want to see how it reacts in our soil first.
I tell you, I can tell you many people that would like one of those blocks to be there, so. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to mention again, do we have anybody in the public who would like to comment on any of these items? Then we'll go ahead. Anybody in the council have a comment?
I'll move the.
Could I make a quick?
Oh, sorry. Go
just
ahead.
Just a rejoinder. I'm just a little cautious about this because I put in a lot of PVC, and I've seen it dug up a few years later, and it's degraded or highly brittle, and so this was news to me that we could do PVC mains. I know they're much bigger and they're probably thicker material. So I think the idea of going with it kind of on a trial basis and testing it out's a good one. But I do take your point. I think it's as soon as we know, we got to jump on it and save all that money.
Pipe, just for council and for the public, pipe technology, people don't think about pipe technology, but even the PVC, our application of it has come a long way. A lot of cities use it exclusively, so it's been more frequent and more common application. But again, to your point, until we get it in our soil with our composition and our water chemistry, we're just going to be cautious.
Thank you. I did have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The consent item passes. The Mayor Pro Tem, doing his job as he should, reminded me that we need to have approval of the City Council minutes from July 10th and a special joint session with the Library Board of Trustees on July 10th. Did you all have a chance to read them? Any changes or comments?
I did. I just feel very sorry for our city clerk. She put a lot of work into that library one, so thank you very much for that. I mean, that was a lot of discussion that you captured.
What I've been trying to do since I assumed this responsibility is to put enough content into the minutes so that if someone didn't have the opportunity to watch an over 2-hour meeting, they would have a good sense of what the issues were and what was discussed. So that's been my goal all along. Yeah. So I appreciate your comments.
And
Thank
you
you.
have accomplished your goal.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you met your objective, so thank you.
Okay, with that, do I have an approval or a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
That was
Motion.
for both.
For both of them, yes. Motion carries. We're now on to item 2, downtown pedestrian safety. City Manager.
We'll have Director Semino address this, Mayor.
All right. A small PowerPoint? Okay.
Aloha, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Mahalo for having me here tonight. Tonight I'm bringing you the an engineering study we did of the downtown pedestrian crosswalks and also the bow outs, the safety of the pedestrians in the downtown. I have a map here. The conclusion we came up with was there isn't enough signage for the mid-block crosswalks. A mid-block crosswalk is a crosswalk that isn't controlled intersection with stop signs. So that would be like the one out here in front of City Hall, the 2 Hermosa ones, Auburn, Windsor, Cursing Court, and so on. We also studied Park Avenue at Sierra Madre Boulevard, which is outside the downtown, but that was one that was of concern because of other issues that the engineer came up with also. So tonight we would like to recommend installing flashing crosswalk signs. I have a picture of one here. They're not dots in the street that will start flashing in the street. These would be a sign in each direction, flashing on both sides of the signs. The pedestrian will walk up and hit the button, and the Bluetooth will tell the lights to flash, and then there will be a sound also for our sight-impaired pedestrians also. This will give a little bit more safety than just a sign that's identifying the crosswalk. This will flash for the time period it takes for a person to walk across the street. And it won't flash all the time. It'll flash only when a pedestrian comes into the crosswalk. The study came up with, in a sense, it says that crosswalks in general give the pedestrian a false sense of security that I'm in a crosswalk, they have to stop. Well, it's true you could get a ticket if you pass someone that's in a crosswalk, but they might not always see you. There's a lot of diversions in downtown. There's shops, there's signs, there's the speed, there's people texting while they're driving. There's a lot of indicators that can cause accidents in a crosswalk, and the pedestrian has that false sense of security being in the crosswalk. So this will give a little bit more of an indication to draw the attention of the driver so the pedestrian is seen in that crosswalk. Along with the analysis of the engineer, he's recommending removing 2 crosswalks, one in town here across the street from Memorial Park for the North Hermosa Street. The reasoning for that is the account of how many people use that crosswalk during our survey, and also because there's already one at City Hall and at the South Hermosa. This will alleviate that 3rd crosswalk for drivers to have to pay attention to. And also if someone's crossing from there, they don't have a crosswalk, they take extra precaution and look for cars and make sure that they stop or there is no cars before they cross the street. In the map here, I have the yellow box indicating where we were suggesting to put the flashing crosswalk signs. They would be City Hall, from Kensington to City Hall. The post office, which is on South Baldwin there at Mariposa, which is 35-mile-an-hour street.
Yeah.
The engineer found that one to be very dangerous as it sits today. And then also the 2 Kirsting Court ones. We have a history of the North Baldwin Kirsting Court with accidents there from pedestrians, and that is our most highly used pedestrian crosswalk during the survey. And then the one on Sir Madre Boulevard at Kirsting Court, that's the 2nd highly used crosswalk in our downtown. We are suggesting just 4 at this time, but there could be more. There is a lot of pedestrian use at the Windsor Lane, the Old City Hall crosswalk, and then there at South Hermosa, the Congregational Church. That's a highly used crosswalk, but not as highly as the others that we've identified as needing for the flashing lights. That pretty much concludes my report. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Yes, Councilman Goss?
Director Sabino, first of all, I don't see the red box on Hermosa. You are taking one out on Hermosa?
The red box is there. It's at the north end of Memorial Park.
It's right there. Do you see it?
Yeah. It's not the congregational one at South Hermosa. It's
Oh, okay, so you're not doing the one on South Hermosa?
no, that
Why
one has
not?
a bow out, and it has a highly used for pedestrian, mainly on weekends with the church.
Because I drive through there every day, and that is, to me, a real, I mean, I know it and I'm aware of it, but we have a lot of people coming up Hermosa from out of town who probably don't know it.
Speed really picks up after Lima,
Yeah.
and that's why the City Hall one is suggested with our elderly walking from Kensington over to.
So the numbers don't justify it there in
Well,
South
they do,
Hermosa.
and we could put in more, but at this time we were just suggesting 4. But if, at the council's direction, we could put in.
I wouldn't want to, would the numbers justify it? I mean,
It's, Councilmember Goss, it's based on a multitude of factors, not just the pedestrian crossing, but also accident history
Right.
as well. So according to the engineer, the 4 with the history and the number of pedestrian crossings that should be lit are indicated on the
they
screen.
stick out over
Right.
the others.
2
Okay.
should be removed. If we can go further than an engineer's recommendation, we just certainly don't want to go less than a engineer's recommendation. We'd have to look at the numbers. My guess is this one doesn't have the accident history to support it.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, just, I mean, the studies were done on Saturday. And, you know, my concern about the Hermosa one that you're proposing to take out, I know in the summer, on Sundays and any event at the park, that one gets a lot of use. So, yeah, I mean, if you take that out, you're going to just divert more traffic to others. But I mean, that one, I'm looking at the numbers here, on a Saturday is 143, but the City Hall one is only 31.
Yeah, that was a Saturday also.
So why would you keep the City Hall one and take out the Hermosa one?
Well, the City Hall one also had a survey, it isn't included in the engineering report, of weekdays. And the weekdays were a lot more traffic.
Yeah.
And also it's because of the continuous speed coming from Lima into town. Christian Court, there at Ceremony Boulevard and Baldwin, the speed isn't the factor. There it's inattention. It's the people are looking around, they're in downtown, they're not paying attention to the crosswalks. But the City Hall one is just, that's the first one that they're coming into town, and their suggestion was to.
And what is the cost again per crosswalk?
It's around 6,500 or 6,500 for a set for each crosswalk. And that would be for 2 signs that flash on both sides of each sign, and then pedestals for the buttons.
So why wouldn't we do that for every crosswalk? Because I mean, I think it might be confusing to drivers to see the flashing and expect to see flashing if there's a crosswalk, and then the next crosswalk you come to, there's no flashing.
That's true. That's true. We were just trying to consider having all of them lit and having flashing throughout all of town.
Okay, thank you.
And the budget, just so council's aware, is coming from the special downtown districts. We do have a surplus in this particular fund. Again, if council wants us to explore going further than the engineer's recommendation, we're comfortable with that, and the cost wouldn't be a factor. Again, we just certainly don't want to go less than what they recommend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a question and comment. Anecdotally, when I'm looking at the 3 that are proposed on Baldwin and on the east side of Sierra Madre, I mean, to me, I notice that all the time. And seeing the, especially one on South Baldwin in front of the post office, I've attempted to do that. I've been like Frogger there, where I keep going straight and right and go back. But I do question a bit of the validity and the reliability of the data, and similar to what Councilmember Capote just stated is, some of these were on Saturday and then some of them were on Tuesday. I thought it might have been like Tuesday and Saturday to get a sample of what's going on the weekday and on the weekend.
Yeah.
But that's, and it is different. I think that the walkability in our town is different, and also the availability of people walking through. But I just wanted to comment that it's not that I'm opposed to them, because again, I definitely see the need, but I just do question when we're looking at 2 different, a weekday and a weekend, to look at the data as to the number of people crossing. So I just wanted to comment on that.
One question is, the engineering report did talk about potentially having these by schools, right? Because there's a lot of traffic, but we want the schools to pay for it, which I think is right. I mean, I think the school should help pay for it. But are we going to talk to Sierra Madre Elementary, St. Rita's, Sierra Madre Middle, and just tell them what we're doing and see if they want to? And I don't know if there's a cost benefit of doing it all at once, but if they want to join in and they can purchase their own and we can install it for them or something like that.
After we my plan was to, after we did these in the downtown, is to talk to Gooden School and St. Rita. Those are really the 2 schools that are affected.
Okay.
Bethany has a 4-way stop there at Highland.
Right.
It's really not an uncontrolled crosswalk. That's a controlled crosswalk.
Okay.
But my plan was to talk to those 2 schools afterwards.
Okay.
St. Rita does really have a lot of traffic there. The count on a Tuesday there at St. Rita was 200-some pedestrians going east and west there. And then Gooden School has their drop-off, so.
Yeah.
But Gooden School and St. Rita both have crossing guards also.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I was a little shocked that we didn't have one in place of only place in town.
Yeah. You can make an argument for the one at Old City Hall also, the one at Auburn.
Yeah, because I was actually hit in that crosswalk.
Oh, wow.
And it was because there was police activity in the only place in town, and I thought the man was slowing down for me, and he wasn't. So I'm just sort of prejudiced that I would love to have the lights there, but,
I wish
you
I
know.
knew that I would have.
Yeah,
Did you report it to the police?
the police were there. They saw the whole thing.
I'm just wondering if it got caught,
Yeah.
picked up in our
It
staff.
should have. But also, we do have a lot of our disabled people who use that crosswalk, and as well as the one in Hermosa. So I'd like to see at least one in that area to assist the disabled. But before we go on, is there any public comment on this
I have
item?
another question.
Yeah.
Just, so priority-wise, wait, and just so I understand, Director Semino, the red to take out altogether or not to put a flashing there?
No, it's to take it out altogether. And that doesn't have to happen. That's just the engineer's recommendation. It can be lit or it can be identified with more signs. It is, though, the engineer's recommendation to have those two removed.
Okay, and the reasoning for choosing 4 at this time, I mean, it's not because of financial restraints, it was just to test these top 4 priority areas?
It was really not to just come in and say, let's put in 8 and bombard the whole town with new signs and lights.
Okay, thank you.
Any public comment on this item? We have a taker. Good evening.
Good evening, Pat Alcorn. And I was just struck at the idea of taking out the one on Hermosa, North Hermosa, because during all the activities at the park, people are walking down from Highland and all the cross streets where they have to park. And also after the event, people are walking back to their cars, and I just think that to take it out altogether, I'm not suggesting that we need a flashing light, but to take it out altogether would be hazardous, I think, for a Sunday when, even during the weekday when they have the activities in the park during the day. I think we really do need to have that painted crosswalk there.
Thank you. Any other comment on this item? If not, I'll bring it back to council. Do you have any comments or questions, recommendations, changes?
Sorry, Mayor, to address that point, one of the items the engineer discussed with us is that the crosswalks give pedestrians a feeling of safety. And if they're included in areas at mid-block where there's very little direction from the Uniform Traffic Code with higher posted speeds, that's more likely to cause an incident than actually not having a traffic crossing or a pedestrian crossing at all. So when so one of the issues we see, we have a lot of things, as Director Semino talked about, going on downtown. We have parallel parking on one side, angle parking on the other side, bow outs, some with trees, some without trees, mid-block crossings, some at bow outs, some not at bow outs. And it's a very, even though it seems straightforward, it's a very complicated 25-mile-per-hour stretch for drivers to navigate. So the reason we started with 4 is that is the engineer's recommendation. And as I know I've said it before tonight, but cost or the budget is not going to be the issue. If council wants to expand beyond that, we're okay. We just don't want to do less than what the engineer is recommending.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is the council is really, and from our public, taking that crosswalk out does not seem like a good idea. And even if we don't put a light up there, it would be, in my opinion, that at least people in town know that there's a crosswalk and you tend to automatically slow down. But there's so much traffic there on Sundays and Sunday nights and weekends that.
And I think from our perspective, and we could of course bring the engineer back, that if we don't want to remove it, that's A-okay, but at that point we should probably make it more noticeable than less. So if council doesn't want to remove it, you're not going to have an issue from us, but we don't want to do less than the engineer's report. So if it's going to be there, we should actually give safety to the pedestrians instead of the illusion of it.
Well, that's, if I can go.
Yeah.
That'd be my recommendation. I really, having lived here 35 years and using that crosswalk almost exclusively when I cross Sierra Madre Boulevard to come to City Hall or the park, I think it's a good location to have a crosswalk. And I'm just concerned about having the lights on one crosswalk as you enter, then the next one not having it,
Yes.
and the next one having it. I think we should just do the lights on every crosswalk in the downtown area just to have consistency so there's no confusion. I mean, we've heard from people before about the concern of safety, and I think making the pedestrian safety a really high priority here is a good thing to do, especially since it doesn't cost much. So maybe people don't like flashing lights, but I mean, the technology's there. I think we'd be remiss to not use it if we can implement it so cheaply. So I'm in favor of removing the one at Park, because I mean, I don't think that one, well, that one obviously doesn't get much use and it's sort of outside the district anyway. Keep the Hermosa one and just light them all up.
Councilmember Capoche, are you including the Montecito in that one also, or you're just saying the Montecito Baldwin also, or
Well,
just
I think
just
so.
the three?
Yeah, because that would be that'd be the last one that you would put going north then, right, at Montecito?
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was part of your thought process in including all downtown.
I think we
That's
should
a
have
busy
it.
one.
I think we should have it because just my experience just driving up or down Baldwin, people just pop out very quickly on those crosswalks, you know. I
And
mean,
some people don't stop at crosswalks, I'm
Right.
just telling you.
Like the Montecito one.
Yeah, and that's right by Bethany too.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a screw.
So what I'm
I-
hearing is that, how many would we do then?
9 total.
9 total?
Yeah, if I'm reading it, so you do the North Hermosa, you do Old City Hall, you would do
Only place in town?
Only Place in Town.
Okay.
We'll call that the
Denise's.
Mayor Del Mar crosswalk.
and City Hall one too.
City Hall, yeah. So it'd be 9 total, right?
So I will ask, is that doable? Do you think we're being too cautious? Do you think?
We're being overambitious.
Like Gabe said, we can always go above and beyond the recommendations, and in some of the recommendations, it said not just signing, the enhancement of signage would benefit at these intersections also. So, yeah, we can do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so do I have a motion?
Just a question before we go
Okay.
in that direction. So in our, I know this is coming from business district, so financially, that's fine too? We can absorb that for 6,500 for 9?
Yes, the particular fund this would be coming from currently as a surplus.
If I could add, just coming from the Chamber of Commerce meeting last night, that this was discussed, and I thought that the business people that weighed in on it seemed to be in favor of it, the signs, so.
Good.
Good.
Okay, I move that we keep the Hermosa crosswalk and light up the 9 crosswalks that were mentioned with the enhanced lighting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like the motion carries, and we'll have 9 crosswalk flashing lights. Thank you for that research. Item number 3 has been pulled, will be continued, and now we're on to our last item for the night, pension rate stabilization plan. And I was guaranteed by the city manager that this was going to be very exciting. So everybody just control yourselves. Here we go.
This is, I
For
will
1
not
minute.
disappoint. This will have higher ratings than the Super Bowl, I'm positive. Very, very exciting. So council has a great background on what unfunded accrued liability is, but just for tonight, for the public at home, we're going to give a real quick primer on what creates our pension payments and what UAL is. And this has quickly become my favorite quote of all time. In talking with CalPERS, the pension agency, on how we should manage our debt, they quoted us saying that you would expect an agency to be able to tolerate the higher payments based on revenue growth and whatnot. So we're going all in on the whatnot, I guess, because we haven't seen a lot of revenue growth. But I thought that was great advice from CalPERS.
Just a quick question, are those people appointed or elected?
They were appointed.
Thank you.
It's not awful advice. So when we talk about what goes into employer contributions, there's 4 main items on the left and how you come up with your contribution requirements. But for UAL, the unfunded accrued liability, really 2 things happened. The actual experience that CalPERS had with its projections turned out to be pretty far off, not sustainable. And when the dot-com bubble burst, they lost I believe a third of their value and went from over 100% funded down to below 70. The second thing that happened when you talk about benefit provisions, that was a nice way of glossing over the enhanced benefits that took place around 2006. So you put the 2 together where your projections are off dramatically in the wrong way, and your benefits are off dramatically also in the wrong way, and what you get is the unfunded accrued liability. This slide is also from CalPERS, and I appreciate how they actually showed little bags of money that would be due for pension benefits at the end of the career. And what they're demonstrating here is that over time, again, when the benefits are increased and the pension expectations are not met, that you get unfunded accrued liability, which is represented by the 5 bags of money at the end of the triangle. So what UAL is the difference between what CalPERS has promised employees and what they actually have to pay. And it's pretty substantial, and we'll get into what that means for the city in a moment. But the last thing that makes the UAL so difficult, and this chart is not meant to be read, it's just an example, but the way that they set the payments up for cities is they said, well, we want to ramp into this. So you have payments due over a 30-year period, but we don't want you to have to cut services dramatically over time. So they actually set up many bases that were paying negative principal or negative amortization. So in this example, if you needed $1 million to make your payments over time, they ramped you into that, and it shows that you're not even covering the interest on your payments, and then that goes in to a later year payment. So it both increases the amount you have to pay dramatically over time with interest, and also the amount of time it takes to pay it. So our current obligation to CalPERS, and we've talked about this a lot with council, we call this the ghost of Christmas future. So if nothing changes, this is what our future is. But we start with what has already happened. So in the 15-16 budget year, we had $0 in unfunded accrued liability payments. Flash forward 3 years, we had $1 million in unfunded accrued liability payments. And if we don't make any changes, that will increase an additional 32% in the next 5 years. It will be the 2nd largest department, if it was to be put all together in our government, behind only police. So what other agencies have done in the San Gabriel Valley is essentially sell debt. We've seen neighboring agencies sell over $100 million in bond debt. They've raised taxes, they've created new taxes that didn't exist, and they've created new taxing districts that also didn't exist, all to fund CalPERS obligations. What council directed us to do, staff, is to find a way to reduce our spending and propose a plan that won't increase the cost to taxpayers. So what we wanted to show council at the initial meeting, we said that CalPERS payments were taking off like a rocket. And I put this on just to show the trend line that is a true statement. It is actually taking off from $0 to $1.3 million in a 5-year span. So for Sierra Madre right now, we owe $28 million. Our UAL payment schedule, if you see in the current budget year, is over $1 million, and it'll be $1.3 million in 2 more years. And then those payments will exceed $1 million annually, going up to, I believe, over 1.4 until 2035-36. So to try and show what this does to our services, we're introducing a concept that we call ability to pay. And that's the ability Sierra Madre has to pay without either reducing services, dramatically outsourcing services, or raising taxes. So the stabilization plan, if implemented, would have an annual savings of between $200,000 and $300,000 next year and increase from there. It would actually increase each year through 40-41. We would achieve our ability to pay in the next budget year. Would reduce our total due CalPERS by 42%, so from $28 million to $16 million. And the total savings from this plan would be just shy of $7 million, which is 25% of the total bill. So spending the $5 million nets you a $12 million return. And the assistant city manager told me I should lead with this number because it's a huge deal when you put it in the context. It's not just the reduction, but the fact that the payment will net you $7 million in savings.
How long will it take us to get to that $7 million?
So it's over the current amortization period, which is 30 years. CalPERS in 2 years is going to move it up to a 20-year payment, which will actually be okay for us.
So can you just explain how those two numbers, the 6.9 and the 12 net, interact?
So the 12 million is total. It includes the savings plus the payment. So the 5 million payment nets you the 7 million in savings for the 12 million reduction overall. So our total due CalPERS is both the payment and the savings, which is where you see in the fourth bullet point reducing it from 27.9 million to 15.9 million.
So just to be, when we say reduce this total due to CalPERS from 27.9 to 15.9, I mean, we're paying them $5 million.
Yes.
So it's not like we don't owe them. Really, the number 6.9, right? I mean,
Total savings,
yeah.
yes, 6.9. Okay. But the total bill, what we're trying to show with the payment and the savings is reduced by the 42%. So we're trying to show the same information in a lot of different ways. So the pension stabilization plan, as Mayor Pro Tem Harabedian just addressed, requires 2 steps. Part 1 is the UAL prepayment, and we've just talked about what the savings and the cash flow are. And the reason we say it takes 2 steps is this will address both the short-term and the long-term pension crisis that we have going on right now. Step 2 is to establish a 115 investment plan and fund it to the tune of $600,000. And I'll explain what that is in a second, but what this does is helps to address the next CalPERS crisis, which we know is coming, when they change their discount rate again, or they miss their mark, or any number of things that happen. So the 115 investment plan, the 115, the name comes from the section of the tax code, and you're able to invest funds more similar to the private market. So had we invested in a 115 plan, last year, our average rate of return would have been 10.9%. Over 5 years, 7.9%. Our investment policy here outside of the 115 plan is very conservative, and we tend to get returns, I believe, of less than 1%. The 115 investment can only be used for CalPERS payments or OPEB for employee benefits or pension. But it is also available should you need it for an emergency. So the funding will still be there if we have a windstorm or any other item. So the stabilization plan for the $5 million, the sources of funding are we would like to apply the current general fund balance, which is above 50%, which is our current council policy, and that's $1.8 million. Few meetings ago, we completed the sale of our undergrounding rights to another city, and that brought $628,000 in unrestricted funding. We would like to apply that. The assistant city manager has been working exceptionally hard over the past year and a half to close out excess accounts, and we've come up with about $800,000 in surplus that we'd also like to apply. And then we're asking council to revise the minimum general fund balance tonight from 50% to 25%. That equals another $2.5 million. And you'll notice that our general fund budget's about $11.5 or $11.7 million. So 25% of 11.5 is not $2.5 million. At the conclusion, if council approves this, we won't actually be at 25%, even though that's a minimum. We'll be closer to about 33% funding in our general fund. Also, from those funds above, we would like council to earmark $600,000 for the later funding of a 115 plan. We're not asking to fund that this evening. We're asking to be able to set it up, and then we want to come back to council at a later date to talk about the best way to manage and invest those funds, whether that's hiring a fund administrator, having citizen oversight, or having them work directly with staff or the city treasurer. But there is some paperwork involved in getting it set up, so we're asking to set it up but not fund it. One of the questions we hear most frequently is why do the prepayment versus the investment? We really have 4 reasons. The returns over time, so a 115 plan would need to average 8% annually each year over 30 years to equal the same savings as the prepayment. But the overall investments couldn't be applied up front like the $5 million. So essentially what you'd be doing is shorting yourself on cash flow and having less of a return over time because you're not getting the interest savings. You also have the risk versus the benefit, so the potential to have investments in good years is minimized by the risk of losses or returns less than 8% annually, which would become important if we were relying solely on investment income to pay down our pension debt. Only 2 years of CalPERS payments total can be applied in emergencies from a 115 plan, so if we funded the $5 million and we did have an emergency, we wouldn't be able to pull it out. Now with the prepayment, those funds are gone, but the money is constantly working at the prepayment rate. And finally, you can only spend it on pension. So whereas the cash flow savings from a prepayment, the $300,000 can be applied to any government purpose. If you use it in a 115 plan, any of the rates or proceeds can only be applied to pension. So looking at, this is our current amortization schedule, and again, trying to show the same information in a lot of different ways. We've always highlighted the current budget year. So this is showing our payments out to the year 2047-48. And again, you see that payments hit $1 million in 18-19 and remain over $1 million until either 36-37 or 35-36. I'm not sure which one on this. And then the concept, the orange line, the concept of our ability to pay. So you'll notice we passed our ability to pay without reducing services or increasing taxes in the budget year that just closed. That's why you see things like closing a library on a Friday or not hiring a dispatcher in police and instead getting coverage with our officers. So looking at it again in the near term, and again with the ability to pay without intervening, we're looking at significant deficits into the next 20 years of our future. So looking at it with stabilization, again the gray line, and then you see the ability to pay. The blue line is if we make the prepayment. You'll see that we'll hit our ability to pay in the next budget year, and our payments will actually be below $1 million annually from now until the end of time under this amortization plan, and remain lower than they actually were last year into the future. And again, showing the same concept in the near term. The blue is with stabilization, the gray is without, and the orange line shows our ability to pay. So the final 2 slides are without stabilization, without either stabilization, raising taxes, or cutting or outsourcing services. We're looking at an average deficit in the future of over $300,000 in the next 5 years. With stabilization, we're looking at an average surplus of $40,000 with increasing cash flow as we move forward. And we've all seen this slide before, but it's worth mentioning again that the total due CalPERS reduced by 42.7%, and the $7 million in savings equaling 25% of the total that's due.
I'll let everybody kind of catch their breath after that exciting presentation. Do we have some questions from council? I'm sure we do.
I do. Just yeah, just one basic one actually that is a little tangentially related is, let's say down the road we reduce it to 25%, our reserve level, and we run into a problem, an emergency of epidemic proportion that we haven't seen before. The windstorm was maybe $1 million, but let's say we run into something that costs us $4 or $5 million, whatever that might be, maybe catastrophic fire or something, and we don't have the money in the reserves to cover everything. What does the city do at that point? What are our options financially?
So I think acknowledging up front that when you have $9 million to put towards some type of catastrophic fire or something like that, that's in a more comfortable position than if you have $5 million to put towards it. We can go based on the emergencies we've had that we know what the costs were, what our reimbursement rate was. We're comfortable with the 25% and having additional funds in the 115 to apply towards it. Having said that, if you go beyond your financial reserve, you're looking at interfund loans, actual loans, reimbursements, and if you're talking about a catastrophic $6 or $7 million event, even with $8 million in reserve, you're looking at forever changed operations until you get the reimbursement. So we should acknowledge up front that having $9 million to put towards a fire is better than having $6. Having said that, with the experience we've had with our emergency response and with our ability to recoup money from state or federal agencies, we're comfortable with the level of funding that is here. But also, again, having said now for the third time, acknowledging it's a significant payment that goes towards CalPERS. We would also have to take into account just everyday operations if we don't make the payment, and trying to find a way to cut another $400,000 out of the budget immediately with that number increasing. What will that do to both our standard everyday operations but also emergency response? And I think there's a risk on that side as well.
So there would be an option of, again, in a very unlikely scenario, you said inter-fund loans. So the general fund could take a loan from the water fund, for example. I'm not saying that's what we would do, but something like that legally we could do.
So I think we'll let the Assistant City Manager address that, or maybe Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah, City Council would need to approve a loan like that, but it would be feasible, correct?
Okay. That's helpful. I think the most compelling, I think this is really well done. The question I had is really on the slide that you talked through. I think it's slide, it's the pension prepayment versus the 115 investment, returns over time, risk versus benefit. To me, that's the most compelling part of this. And can you just repeat or just go into a little bit more detail with this $5 to $6 million prepayment? If you just broke it down on a yearly return, like a fixed return on our money, what are we getting on that money?
So just in its most basic sense, that's going to be about $400,000 a year for the total in 12 million. I'd have to do 30 divided by 7 million if anyone has their calculator out to figure specifically what that is.
But it's a significant yearly annual return on your money.
Yeah.
It's a very good investment, right? And I think that you touched upon this. If we were to put all that money in the 115 investment to get that same return, what type of yearly, I guess, what would we need to get on a yearly basis to equal that?
To manage the in-year savings, it would be 8% every year to match a savings. But again, because you'd only be applying that 8% savings or $400,000 annually, you wouldn't get the accrued savings over time versus a $5 million payment in year one versus a $400,000 payment annually. You'd hit the number in the end of your payments would be the same, but your savings would not be the same.
And if we had a huge surplus in our 115 investment, if we put all this money in the 115, we only can use that on pension, right?
Any employee benefits, you can use it for OPEB.
You can use it for OPEB.
Pension,
okay.
But only employee.
We couldn't use
it for fire.
We couldn't use it for fire. Okay. Thank you.
But you could use that money to pay any remaining UAL that you have versus paying it out of the general fund, correct?
That's correct, Councilmember Kapochin. One of the reasons we talk about this being a two-pronged strategy is we would anticipate with that $600,000, future councils, maybe even this council, depending on what CalPERS does, deciding to take the investment interest earnings or part of the actual invested amount and make another prepayment. If you have a good year in the market, it may make sense for council to take $100,000 and make a prepayment and get the same level of savings over time. But this money will be available for the next, we call it the next CalPERS crisis or crunch, because we know even what CalPERS is saying today, the returns over time are not realistic, which means as they lower their discount rate, which they're likely to do, that's going to increase your pension payment. In this 115 plan, in the same time, will be accruing interest at market rate.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
In the past, we've had discussions about setting appropriate levels for reserves. And I've never heard anyone talk about anything below 50%. But in our one-on-ones, I've learned that there are some cities, maybe many cities, that have set their minimums quite aside, quite apart from this issue, that this is a fairly routine or fairly normal level for reserves. Is that not true?
I think when the Sierra Madre Council had the discussion about setting at 50%, it was done at a time when our general fund totaled about $7 million. So 50% of $7 million is $3.5 million. As we collapse funds and we put it at a ratio of 25% over time, now we're at 11.5 million. We're still at that same 3.5 million number as when it was set. It's at a lower ratio, and as we collapse funds in the future, it'll increase. So how we set the minimum reserve, again, it's the minimum. It doesn't mean you go to 25% and stay there. We anticipate being at 33%. What we're looking at is cash flow and flexibility, and at 25% of the current general fund, we're comfortable with that amount. Again, recognizing that a catastrophic event, if you're talking about an $8 million fire, it's going to be massive operational changes at that point, almost regardless of what you're setting your minimum reserve fund balance at.
The 25% is not an unusual level.
It's not unusual for me. I don't want to speculate on other cities. It's hard to say what everyone else is doing in California. Assistant City Manager and I talked about this quite a bit. The 25% number we feel is appropriate both for cash flow and also to be able to respond to emergencies.
Yes, questions?
Mr. City Manager, thank you for this presentation and for staff putting this together. When you first brought this up as a discussion item, I did not think I would be excited about it, but it is very exciting. So, and innovative and creative. I just had a question, just for clarification. I think I am answering my own question, but I misunderstood this. I thought the $600,000 for the 115 plan was a separate amount from the $5 million, but the $600,000 is part of the $5 million. Is that correct?
No,
I'm sorry, no, it's part of the total. So if you add the numbers up that we're asking for, they equal more than $5 million. I think they actually equal 5.7, 5.8. And we're trying to break it down in two parts, but that total bucket of funding is where it's coming from.
So the four sources of funding equal the $5 million plus the $600,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Comments?
I'll just say it kills me to just prepay $5.5 million. But I'm just looking at the overall, the big picture here. I mean, this is an emergency. If we don't do this, how could we meet our UAL obligations? But it just, I don't know. I just don't think it's really. I wish that the legislature or the governor would do something. I mean, the first PEPRA was very helpful, but I think more needs to be done so that employees take a little bit of this risk and don't push all the risk on the taxpayers. Taxpayers have their own risk for their own pensions and also the burden of public sector pensions as well. But it just doesn't look like we can get any traction in getting any kind of legislation to fix this. So I don't see where we have any solution other than to go to the taxpayers and ask them to pay a tax, additional tax, to pay for the public sector pensions.
You have to remember our legislatures are government employees.
Yeah.
And they're in CalPERS.
Self-serving here, yeah. So I really, I think this is really great that you've come up with this plan, and it's very convincing argument that we can run our city very well without having that level of reserves that we've had in the past. And I think it's just helpful to explain a little bit about what the city manager is saying about collapsing funds, and the one that comes to mind is the paramedic fund the revenue from the paramedics used to be considered separate from the general fund, and now it's rolled into the general fund, and that's why the general fund is bigger in that regard. I don't know how much per year that is, but
The revenue, I believe, is about $350,000, all counted with the subscription plan.
right. So with just a change of the pencil, that automatically made our reserve requirement go up by $150,000 just because of an accounting change. So when you look at it that way, our reserves are higher than anybody ever intended them to be when this was first drawn up. So,
You know, this has taken us years, if not decades, to get to this point, and you know, we are just so lucky to be the council to have to really look at this, as we've talked about, not wanting to kick the proverbial can down the road. This will hit some council at some point if we don't take action at this point. And knowing what our surrounding cities and cities across the state have been doing to address this is not just a Sierra Madre issue. This is municipalities all across the state and what they've been dealing with, unless they went private. But knowing that a lot of our surrounding cities have either gone to a bond, increased taxes, you know, these are options that we're all trying to avoid. I think this is the fiscally responsible thing to do. It's hard to look at the $5 million, almost $6 million price tag, but what this could mean 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road, and our ability to pay. I think a lot of those graphs, as not interesting as they look, they're very extremely informative to know what could happen to this city in 10, 20 years. And I think we need to take that responsibility, make this decision. I think it's creative. I think it's strangely exciting. But I am definitely in favor of doing this and taking this proactive measure as opposed to seeing what happens 3-5 years down the road.
Anybody else?
I'll go.
Okay.
First, I agree with everything I just heard my two colleagues say. I feel like the fiscal responsibility of the city in recent years has enabled us to make this decision. There are not a lot of cities that are situated with reserves the way we have them. And I do take your point. I think this is a kind of an emergency because I really feel inaction leads us into some very deep water. So I think this is a very prudent thing to do, and it's very innovative. I don't know any other cities that are talking about doing this, but this works. This is going to be newsworthy. And I just give you a lot of credit, Mr. City Manager, Madam Assistant City Manager, and staff. I'm not excited about spending this money either. None of us is. It's crazy money. But this is a crazy problem, and we've known about this problem for some time. If you pay any attention to government, it's not just at the city level. It's some counties, states, and federal government issues. Or pensions are all out of whack. So I feel this is a really great step, and I hope that our citizens understand the situation we're in and understand that we don't have a lot of choices, but this is a very positive choice.
Yeah, I'm fully in favor of it, and I think that I view this a little bit differently. You know, I view it as an investment. I really don't view it as necessarily paying or spending $5 million right now. I think if we were to take this out of the pension context, and the city manager were to come to us and said, we can put our $5 million into a bond that will bring us 8% every year. Think about that investment income. I think we would all be like, that's a no-brainer. Absolutely, let's do that. We are essentially doing that. I mean, that's what this is. We're putting $5 million into a vehicle, which is just a prepayment, that will bring us a fixed return every year of 8%. And you don't see those types of returns really in government very often. We can see what we're getting on our investment of our reserves now, and it's less than 1%. So I think having huge reserves is actually not a great thing. And I think that unless you're getting a big return on that money, there's a lot of risk of just holding that money at bay. So if you view it as this just being a managing of future costs or expenses that aren't going anywhere with current assets, I think this is really innovative, and it's a really smart way of doing it. And, you know, to me, again, when we explain this to the voters, I mean, it's a pension issue, but it's really just a management of financial risk going forward. And this is a really easy decision. The only thing that I would say don't do it is if there was another way of using that 5 million to get more than an 8% return every year. And that would be it, right? I mean, if you can put that into, or if you could have dumped it all into the 115 and we could have assured that we got a 10% return every year, you would do that because you would get more money every year back and you could actually manage the pension liability better. But it seems like the numbers say this is the best use of the money. And it's really a no-brainer if you look at it like that. I think people might get hung up on, well, that's $5 million and it's pensions. I mean, it's no different from any other liability that we're going to have going forward. So I think it's a really compelling presentation you made, and I'm for it.
I just want to thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for bringing that up. I think even looking at it from that perspective, I mean, I was sold as it was. But thinking about it as investment and the 8%, where do you find an 8% return on anything? Because if you have that, I'd like to see it. So thank you for sharing that.
Should do a GoFundMe, and we can get in on the action.
I do have a few comments. First of all, I do have to commend our city manager and our assistant city manager and the staff and the whole finance department for coming up with what we feel is a solution to a problem that we didn't think had a solution 2 years ago. And we asked you to come up with a solution to reduce our UIL without going to the taxpayer and having any sort of taxes, and you were able to do that. So thank you for doing that. You know, this is a pension issue in that this pension, even in private industry and schools and almost every industry, is causing a lot of problems due to the way it's been funded, but also because people are living longer. So when pensions first came about in the 1930s, people retire, they lived about 10 years, and that was it. Now you can retire at 50 and live until 80. So, you know, it's just, pensions are probably going to go by the wayside soon. I do commend CalPERS for one thing and one thing only, and that is going from the classic to the PEPRA. That will enable and help us in the future, but also to come up with the solution. And I do hope that one of our future city councils thanks this council for doing this for them, because we could have easily said, hey, we're not going to deal with it. You, next council, you deal with it. But we did. We took it, and I'm very proud of what we have done. So with that, if I have a motion to go ahead and move to approve this, as well as set up the 115 account.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion carries. Thank you very much.
Mayor, can I also, I know other council members thanked our assistant city manager tonight, but I just want to call out the attention that she put on.
Stand up.
Especially.
Get to the podium. Let us applaud you. Nice job. You should probably do a presentation at the League of Cities on this, in the pension reform. That would be good. Okay, we don't have any other items. Do we have anything for future agendas? We do have a special council meeting on July 31st, right?
That's correct, Mayor.
Anything else?
Not a formal item, but being the picture taker that I am, I would love for everyone that's in their Hawaiian gear afterwards to take a picture. I see staff here. It's great to see everyone so festive. And we're done early, so I think we can do that.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.